Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the effective service delivery within the homeless response system training. I am Amber Freeman, and I am the interim director of training, technical assistance, and community impact at the Connecticut Coalition to End Homelessness. So for those of you that are new to joining us or CCEH trainings, I'm just going to start with a quick overview of CCEH in case some of you all are not familiar with us. So a lot of information, let's see. So in summary, right, CCEH, we are a nonprofit organization. We're a membership organization that works with faith-based groups, other groups, providers throughout the state. And our goal is to end homelessness. Our collective mission is to prevent and end homelessness in Connecticut. It says it right in our name. So our vision is to have a statewide system that is capable of ensuring that homelessness is rare, brief, and non-recurring. If you are new to the homeless response system, that is something that you would hear quite often, right? We want homelessness to be rare, meaning that no one experiences it. Doesn't want it to happen quite often. We know that it does, but we want it to be rare. Brief, if someone does experience homelessness, as short as possible, and non-recurring, meaning one time. So if they do experience homelessness, hopefully that is the only time that they're experiencing it, and they won't have repeat episodes of homelessness. So we have 5 main areas, roles and functions within CCEH. Our first is data and analysis, where we administer statewide data system, HMIS, I'm sure you all are familiar with, and we use that data system to conduct data analysis, research to inform and influence practice, policy, and funding decisions related to ending homelessness. We also have training and TA, my areas, where we work with providers to help them build capacity, share, learn, and implement best practices. Advocacy, where we're educating elected officials, the public, different partners about what the problems are, talking about what the solutions are, and then any resources that we need to end homelessness. Community impact, we strengthen local collaboration, create and support adherence to policies and procedures, provide staff support in communities, and ensure quality. And then lastly, our client financial assistance, where we raise money to fill the gaps in emergency resources that frontline workers can access to help clients. So some of you all are aware, we have YHDP program, we have the Homeful program, we have several different programs so that we can assist the community. Quick overview of who we are at CCEH and what we do. But we're providing this training today because really want to kind of level set our field. Been doing a lot of trainings that really focus on having a strong foundation, getting back to the core of our homeless response system, getting to having conversations and training on what is housing first principles, right? What is providing case management, such as effective service delivery like we're doing now. Also, housing first principle. What is shelter diversion? So really strengthening our foundation and really laying down a strong foundation that we're trying to get back to. A lot of that foundational knowledge, I think, has kind of been lost. We really want to set the tone and go back and really have those trainings to establish that. So for this training, there's not one thing that is needed to provide a effective service, right? There's a variety of things that goes into providing effective service. I think before we can talk about how to provide effective service, we have to go and have a better understanding of what that means, right? So we're going to spend some time talking about the causes of homelessness, trauma and experiencing homelessness. We're going to talk about the housing first principles, go into supportive housing and what that truly means, different best practices such as assertive engagement, harm reduction, motivational interviewing. And then we're going to go into the difference between providing services versus effective services. And lastly, we'll close out by going over some scenarios. So only have an hour and a half. This is a lot of information. I will say that all of these different sections that we're going into will be separate trainings, right? It's going to take a separate training to really go into what Housing First is, a separate training to really talk about assertive engagement, but we're going to touch on them today because those are all major components when you're talking about delivering effective services. Okay, and I'm going to just do a quick disclaimer in case you all hear sounds. I do have a puppy and I put him in his crate and he is not very happy right now. So in case you all hear some barking, he will settle down, but I think he's okay for now. I just heard him. Hopefully you guys did not. All right, so causes of homelessness. There's many causes of homelessness, but the main areas, the 5 main areas is just there's a lack of housing. We hear that from you all the time. There's a lack of housing, especially a lack of affordable housing. And then without housing options, people face eviction, they face instability and homelessness. You need housing in order to house someone so that they don't experience homelessness. Income and housing affordability, sorry. So if someone is not able to afford their rent, if they're not able to produce a decent income or afford housing, that is a cause of homelessness. Those are obvious ones, but other ones are a history of health problems. So we see this, especially those that are in permanent supportive housing, for those that have mental health diagnoses or substance abuse diagnoses or even physical health. Those are causes of homelessness. The symptoms may be so severe that it affects their everyday living. Maybe they're not able to obtain income. Maybe they're not able to go to work on a daily basis, or not having just basic understanding of what it is to be a good tenant or seek housing. That can cause someone to experience homelessness. We see a lot of individuals that are escaping violence, unfortunately, enter our homeless response system. There is a huge correlation between domestic violence and homelessness, unfortunately. We did have a training a few weeks back on this. So if you'd like to know more, you can find it on our webinar library. But those are escaping violence. Many survivors of domestic violence become homeless when they're leaving an abusive relationship. They're starting all the way over. They don't have a natural support. It's hard to get on their feet. So unfortunately, they experience homelessness. Another cause of homelessness is the impact of racial disparities. You'll see that minority groups in the US experience homelessness at a higher rate than whites. And we're going to go into that because it is very severe, to be honest with you. So let's just look at this graph right here. Let's look at it from the bottom up. We see that Blacks, African Americans, are about 13% of the US population. They make about 13% of the US population. However, African Americans experience homelessness at 39%. So that's almost doubled. 13% of the US population, but 39% experience homelessness. That's a huge difference. So it's 39%, but out of that 39%, there's more than 50% of the families that have children experience homelessness. That is, when you really think about it, it really makes a huge difference. And I will say for Connecticut, that number is a little different, but for Connecticut, Black African American population is 10.72%, but 34% of that 10% experience homelessness. What are some reasons why you all think that is?
Hi, my name is Dawn Wright, and I am with CHD Adult Mental Health. I think a large part of that is our income. We are definitely lower income people, and I think that that is a very large part. And a lot of those doors that are unfortunately open to our white counterparts are not open to us in a lot of areas. So that would be my feedback on that. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dawn. Yes.
I think another reason is also credit. I think credit plays a major role also.
Credit, income, any others?
Lack of knowledge.
Oh, sorry.
I think a lack of knowledge of resources that might be available.
Yep, having accessible as well as equitable
Yeah.
resources.
I was going to say criminal background.
Criminal background, yes, unfortunately, African-American population has a large percentage that are incarcerated.
Unemployment.
Unemployment. Yep. So overall, there's several different reasons, and you all touched on a lot of them, but we're talking about also a system that is built off of systemic racism, right? We're talking about a system that has years and years and years of inequities for people of color. So think about just the discrimination that goes along with that, just the trying to find a landlord that is willing to or open to renting to a person of color, poverty, affordable housing, housing discrimination, access to quality health care. So there's a lot of reasons why African Americans experiencing homelessness at a higher rate. You all hear my dog? Okay. I can give me one.
Yeah, I hear.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Really
Sorry.
cute.
No, he's not cute. If you all can give me 1 second, please.
Listen, I was waiting for mine to start and they're passed out on the couch. So they must be having empathy for the dog that's crying. So just saying.
Yeah, it's either a dog barking or a cat walking across the screen. Yeah.
A lot of our mental health care, that's our self-care, you know. That, coffee, tea, the gym.
All right, I am so sorry. Okay, so we are setting the foundation and having a better understanding of why individuals experience homelessness, right? As well as the effects that homelessness has on someone. I believe in knowing and coming from a place of understanding so that we can provide better services. So trauma that goes hand in hand with experiencing homelessness. We know that homelessness within itself is traumatic, right? Just being homeless, experiencing homelessness is traumatic. So people experiencing homelessness often live with a multitude of personal challenges, such as sudden loss of home or adjusting to conditions of shelter life. For the shelter providers on the call, how would you be if you had to live in a shelter? What are some things that you all see? We have 90 folks on here. Any shelter providers?
I work for Bethel, but I'm the shoreline diversion specialist, but I do go into the shelter quite often. And I will say that, you know, there is that whole loss of it's a combination of going in and having somebody else control your life versus having a roof of your own roof over your head. You're required to follow somebody else's rules. You know, I don't want to say, in some ways it feels like a loss of independence because they are required to be in at a certain time. The expectation is to have you have somebody to answer to all the time in shelter, which is very different from, you know, walking into your own home. And if you live by yourself, there's nobody to answer to, you know what I mean? So there's a higher set expectation, I think.
Right. All right, thank you, Tabby. Everything that she said, so there's a lack of privacy, not feeling safe, right? You don't know who you're around. You're feeling alone. You have a lack of social support. You don't know who you can trust or who you should trust. Yes, there are providers saying, hey, we're here to assist you, but they don't know if they should trust someone, right? And then within the larger society, people experiencing homelessness often are marginalized, isolated, and discriminated against. They're highly vulnerable to violence and victimization. They're often re-traumatized, including within our homeless response system. So think about how many times that someone comes into our system and we ask them to tell their story. How many times do we ask them to, you know, talk about their housing crisis, talk about their past. This is one of the reasons why we're moving away from the VI-SPDAT, because think about the questions that's on the VI-SPDAT. Does someone have a history of prostitution, any domestic violence, social support system? They have to tell their story time after time after time, from the CAN assessment to the VI-SPDAT, to getting a case manager, to if they're transferred to someone else. It can be re-traumatizing, going through that whole process all over again. So most families who are experiencing homelessness are headed by single women, and these women experience post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, substance use at a higher rate than national average because of this trauma, the stress that goes along with experiencing homelessness. So those are individuals, and we often work with individuals, but we do know, unfortunately, we do have family shelters. We do have children that are experiencing homelessness as well. So homelessness can have a tremendous impact on children, as you all can imagine. So it affects their education and their health, their sense of safety, and overall development. However, the good thing about children is, fortunately, they are resilient, right? Fortunately, children who experience homelessness are not impacted forever, right? They're not impacted forever. So when they're compared to other individuals that have low income, they see that the symptoms that goes along with it typically diminish within one episode, right? It's not going to last a lifetime, hopefully. Children are resilient. However, when comparing them to low-income families, you can see that those experiencing homelessness have been shown to have higher levels of emotional and behavioral problems. They have an increased risk of serious health problems. They're more likely to experience separations from their families. And then they experience more school mobility. They may repeat a grade, they may be expelled or dropped out of school and have a lower academic performance. So it does definitely affect them, definitely. However, research shows that children are highly resilient. So I don't know what exactly that means, they're resilient, but it definitely does affect them. I saw someone did have their hand up.
I wanted to share that, I experienced homelessness when I was a very small child, and it still affects me. And I know others that it's the same way. It's something that, that never goes away. You have that insecurity for the rest of your life. Even being a homeowner and, being financially secure, you still have that in the back of your mind, the fear of becoming homeless.
I'm sure.
They
Thank
say
you.
children are resilient, but the stuff that children go through, as it doesn't go away, it stays with them.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing.
You're welcome.
Anyone else?
I also would like to say, children, they're carriers of the people that are taken, emotional carriers as well, as the parents are. And one of the things that I wanted to bring out is that children actually experience blame. They also experience a great amount of shame about being in the situations that they're in, that they actually have no control over, and they continue in that shame, from being displaced and not having a home. And, there was a lot of things, even as a child, I grew up with a family of 9. And although we were never homeless, it's still a lot of things that I grew up with in shame about my mom not being able to afford certain things that other kids, with smaller families went through. And it was rough. So I can imagine how a child who is actually homeless and living in a shelter, where they also have to be worried about other people. There's all types of people in shelters. You know what I mean? Let's be real. And you never know what could happen with them, and what they see from these people that are in the shelters that have alcohol and drug problems and different things like that, because there's all types of people there. So shame would be one of mine, and blame, and they just feel so helpless. So I just wanted to put that in too.
All great points. Thank you so much. So with that being said, and knowing that homelessness comes with trauma, experiencing a housing crisis, experiencing homelessness in general is traumatic. And then there's all those other components added on top of it, as we just talked about. So it's important to have a trauma-informed care approach, which is one of our best practices that we practice within our homeless response system. So having a trauma-informed care approach is basically having the understanding or assuming that the individual is more likely than not to have a history of trauma, right? So trauma-informed care recognizes the presence of trauma symptoms. It acknowledges the role trauma may play in an individual's life, including service staff. When an individual experiences homelessness and they have all of those things that we just discussed, right? That's going to affect them. And it may affect how they interact with you, and it also affects their everyday life. So knowing that, and coming from a place of understanding that trauma affects you is where we come from within this homeless response system, right? So trauma-informed care requires a system to make a shift from asking, what is wrong with this person? Although we should never ask that. What is wrong with this person? To what happened to this person? What type of trauma did they experience? Because we know that that affects how they live, how they may respond, right? So a trauma-informed care approach strives to understand the whole of an individual who is seeking services, not just what is presented right before you, not just the fact that they need housing, not the fact that maybe they have a mental health diagnosis, but understands the whole of the person that is seeking services. Who are they? What are their needs? What are they about? The whole of the person, all right? So when trauma occurs, it affects the individual's sense of self, their sense of others, and their beliefs about the world. Imagine having all of those different experiences, right? Their beliefs can directly impact the individual's ability or their motivation to connect with and utilize support services. So, as we said, it might affect their view on the world. Maybe they have a history of just constantly being let down. Maybe they have a history of just feeling alone, feeling like, why should I even bother trying? It's not going to work out. So that will affect how they interact with you all. So sometimes someone can seem as though they're disengaged. Sometimes someone can appear as they don't want to work with you or they don't care, but it may be their trauma. And their trauma is why they are responding to you in that way. So come from a place of trauma-informed care, where it's not just taking everything from face value. Okay, fine, you don't want to meet with me, we'll just discharge you. No, let's continue to try to engage them. Let's see if we can build rapport. Let's dig deeper. So trauma-informed care, that is our overall approach. What are some ways that trauma may appear during our homeless response system?
It can appear in aggression or anger, depending. You know, I was just at a training yesterday where, you know, they kind of defined aggression versus violence. So, you know, as a navigator for Can Entry, it's, you know, there's a lot of, you don't understand, you know, you're not listening to me. What are you going to do for me? And sometimes just giving them the ability to share their story and treat them with respect and dignity will calm things down, you know, but that's always that it's usually a lot of verbal aggression. At least that's what I see.
That's a good example. And it may not be because they're aggressive as though they're going to physically harm you, but that's how they show their fear. That's how they show being let down. That's how they show not wanting to open up to you. So that may be their trauma. So trauma-informed care approach, right? Which we utilize, and there's 5 main areas in a trauma-informed system of care. The first is safety. So you're ensuring physical and emotional safety for both you as the provider, but also the client. Another main area is trustworthiness, where you're showing that you are trustworthy. And you do this by making tasks clear and maintaining appropriate boundaries. Also, choice. We want to prioritize choice and control. We are person-centered. It is all about the client's choice. It is not about what we say they need to do. Encourage them. They have choice. This is their plan, their service. Collaboration is huge when we're talking about trauma-informed system of care, where we're maximizing collaboration and sharing of power. Lastly, empowerment. Prioritizing empowerment and skill building. And we're going to go into more detail about that skill building part, but also cultural responsiveness and taking into consideration the cultural, the historical, and the gender issues that go along with that. So all together, that creates a trauma-informed system of care. And this can be a full separate training within itself. That's something that we are planning. So, okay, so we started with laying down some of the foundations and having a better understanding for causes of homelessness and how homelessness affects someone, right? And the trauma that goes along with it. So when we're talking about providing effective services, we have to talk about housing first principles. We are a housing first state. And that principle is what our system is based off of. So housing first is the belief that housing is a basic necessity that must be prioritized before an individual can pursue other personal goals and work towards improving their quality of life. So often I hear that someone's not ready to be housed, right? Sometimes providers may tell them that they may need to go to a substance abuse program first, or they need to get employment first, or they need to have some type of support system, do all of these things before they are housing ready. Housing readiness is not a real thing. It doesn't exist. It's not a real thing. It's something that we try to create. However, with housing first, our focus is housing someone first, right? And then once they are housed, then they're able to focus on all of those other areas, right? House them so that they have a place to lay their head. They don't have to stress about that. Then we're able to help them with earning income, right? Connecting them to a mental health clinician if necessary, going to a primary care physician, doing all of those things. But first, we're going to house them. Okay, we're going to talk about, there's 4 main principles for housing first. So and I see there's a lot in the chat. So I'm just talking away. You all are putting a lot in the chat. If anyone has anything where you want to interrupt, feel free to raise your hand so that I can see. Okay, because I don't see if anyone's asking any questions in the chat. Okay, so there's 4 principles that goes with the housing first. First principle is homelessness is first and foremost a housing problem and should be treated as such. It's a problem. Then the only treatment to homelessness is housing. That's it. Housing is a right to which all are entitled. Third principle is return people who are experiencing homelessness or at imminent risk of homelessness to stable, permanent housing as quickly as possible and connect them to resources that sustain housing. The emphasis is sustain housing. We are housing focused. However, we are not housing only. So in order for someone to sustain housing, there should be other things in place as well, right? But we're going to house them first, and then we want them to be able to sustain that housing.
Oh, ding, ding, ding.
Ding dong.
Ding, ding.
Okay, so the 4th principle is issues that may have contributed to a household's homelessness can be best addressed once they are housed. So house them first, and then we can work on all those other things as well. I saw someone have their hand up.
I was gonna say that that the rapid rehousing, that doesn't work because I'm working with 2 clients that had rapid rehousing for a year, and now they're facing homelessness. One is in an eviction process, and the other one, I know that one I don't work with anymore, but it was the same thing. So rapid rehousing, it's not the best.
Well, with rapid rehousing, that's one that we try with everyone, because we don't know if someone is going to be successful or not with rapid rehousing. Sometimes people just need that additional support. They need that housing, that subsidy, that case management that goes along with it, and then they're able to jump back on their feet. I like to think of rapid housing as like a trampoline effect, right? You're giving them that support so they can bounce back on their feet. However, we don't know if everyone's going to be successful or not. We just do our part and provide them with as much support, services, resources that we can do. but we don't know if they're going to be successful or not, but we still try. So I like to think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs when I think about the housing first principle. As you can see, housing is at the bottom, right? It is at the foundation with the other survival and safety needs. The physiological needs is right at the foundation. So someone has to be breathing. Obviously, everyone needs to be alive. Food, water, shelter, clothing, sleep. We know that we all need those things to function properly, right? But for some reason, we think that the shelter is not a foundational need. We think that shelter can hold off, but it's necessary to have a strong foundation. Shelter is an essential need, right? So once we house someone and meet all of those needs at the bottom, then they're able to focus on their safety, security, their love and belonging, their self-esteem, and their self-actualization. But we have to meet all of these foundational needs at the bottom first. Okay, so I'm quickly going to go over supportive housing. And the main thing for supportive housing, we kind of just touched on it, but the main thing for supportive housing is it's an evidence-based approach to reduce homelessness by combining a rental subsidy with flexible support services. And of course, the intensity changes based off of the person's needs. We have wrap rehousing, which is a lighter touch. And then we have permanent supportive housing, which is extremely intensive. But these support services are housing focused, but they are not housing only. They are support services, housing focused, but not housing only. So we need to assist the client with teaching them, of course, the basic skills of tenancy, as well as how to maintain their housing, right? So that's not just housing. It is how to maintain their housing. It's employment. It is taking care of their mental health, taking care of their physical health, helping them with the support system, those various things. So the rental assistance plus the support service together equals supportive housing. Both wrap rehousing and permanent supportive housing are supportive housing. The important part about supportive housing is this is where you all play such a huge role, right? Support services, they're essential. They are essential. We focus on the housing, but the housing part is only the beginning. It is not the end. That's where the support services really come into place. So with the support services, providers are responsible for the intervention. They're not responsible for the outcome. For the example that we just had, we don't know if someone's going to be successful or not. However, we still have to provide services. We still have to have effective interventions, right? So they're voluntary for tenants, but they are mandatory for providers. We have to provide support services. So we're going to go into providing those support services, right? And best practices that goes along with it. One of the best practices that goes along with providing effective services is assertive engagement. Assertive engagement is extremely important. It really sets the tone to your service delivery, right? This is where you are, this is where you're explaining the program to the client. This is where the client is getting their first impression of the program and their first impression of you as a provider. They're having a probably a conversation within themselves to see how they want to proceed in this, right? Are they going to trust you? Are they going to engage in services or not? Right, so it really sets the tone. This is the time when we want to be as persistent and active as possible. So the persistence looks friendly, It's not aggressive persistence, but it's friendly. You're trying to actively engage the person. You're being active, which involves trying new things and new approaches to engage. Engaging someone, it's not a one size fits all, right? You have to engage people based off of what their needs are. With assertive engagement, this is when you're building rapport, right? You are trying to get some type of relationship with that person. And this time, it is okay to have small talk and get to know them. Small talk is where they're figuring you out, right? You're trying to build some type of relationship so that they can want to meet with you, so that they can want to answer the phone when you call. They feel comfortable telling you what's going on with them. So rapport is extremely important. During the engagement phase, you're also building trust, and you can build that trust by being consistent and reliable, non-judgmental, and also being honest with them. During the engagement phase, this is when you're listening, showing active listening, you're observing, you're assessing, and you're also communicating very clear. It is completely okay to set and maintain realistic expectations. This is when you're talking about the program, right? You're talking about what it is that you may expect from them when it comes down to how the program operates. It's okay to be clear and say, if someone's looking for an apartment, you're not going to be able to find an apartment that has granite countertops and a vault ceiling for $900. I understand that's what you want, but it's just not realistic. Maybe let's focus on employment or something like that, and then you can get to that place eventually. So it's okay to set realistic expectations and to be clear. During the engagement phase, it should be highly individualized. So this is when it's based off of someone's needs, right? As I said, it's not a one size fits all. You want to stay as positive as possible during engagement, the initial phases, and you want to be flexible. So you want to meet the person where they are in all ways, mentally, physically, if necessary. If someone's not able to come to the coming to the office, maybe you can meet them in their apartment, right? Realistically, for some, based off of what roles you all play, we need to be in the apartments anyways. So just meeting the person where they are, assessing to see how much type of case management you need to provide. How intensive are the services that you may need to provide? So be flexible, be creative with your approaches. If you are not able to engage with someone, if you're not able to find that person, think about other ways that you can engage them, other ways that you can maybe find them or communicate with them. So what assertive engagement is not, right? So we talked about assertive engagement. It's really about engaging someone, being creative with your approaches, working with the person, meeting them where they are. So what assertive engagement is not, here's an example, is calling a client and leaving just one voicemail message prior to closing their case. I called them, they didn't call me back. They must not be interested. I'm just gonna close them out. That's not assertive engagement. You wanna continue and try other creative ways to get in touch with them, right? Something that can help is, did you initially get family members' information, right? Maybe they don't have a phone, or maybe they have a support system. Maybe they're with someone all the time. Maybe you know where they hang out and you can go to that place. But trying other ways to engage them, to communicate with them. Assertive engagement is not determining that a client is not interested in services because they did not attend their scheduled appointment. That doesn't mean that they're not interested. That goes along with the trauma-informed care approach, right? It can mean so many other things. But that doesn't mean let's just close them out. How else can we get in touch with them? How else can we figure this communication thing out? Let's come up with a communication plan. Let's meet in the community at a certain place. So assertive engagement is not returning a client that was matched to a housing subsidy back to the can because they did not show up to their scheduled time to view the apartment. That doesn't mean that they don't want the apartment. That doesn't mean that they don't want housing. But how else can you work with them? Assertive engagement is not only getting the client's contact information. So you're only getting their contact information. Are you providing them with your contact information? Are you getting contact information from their support system? Do you have their email address if they may have one? Do you have their areas of where they occasionally hang out? Maybe one day you can drive by there. Friends that they may engage with. A store that they're at all the time. You can call that store and say, hey, I need to see so-and-so. Maybe they spend a lot of time at the library and you can connect with that library staff. All right, assertive engagement is not requiring that the client comes to the office for all their appointments. Not requiring is the key word. It's working together on the plan, working together about how you approach it. So what are some other examples of what assertive engagement is not? Anyone? All right.
I think, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I think assertive engagement is kind of working in that interdisciplinary team, especially when you're coming from people with trauma, long histories of substance abuse. There's so many trust issues and so many issues that go on with that. So I have a client with that. And so I pulled in one of our CCT team members who the client had a relationship with before, and I pulled him in. So we're kind of, working together because he's struggling, but he also has a lot of trust issues. So it's gone a lot smoother since I brought this other team member back in, because now we're working together, and now there's more trust there on his part. So that was really beneficial, and that's, it's being assertive, but it's not, it's looking at the situation and looking, okay, am I being the most effective here on my own? Is there somebody else I can bring in that this person has already established a relationship with to make this more successful? So that's what I did.
Great, excellent points. Thank you.
I would say that assertive engagement is not writing the client for every little thing that they're not doing. Like, oh, I got to stand this person about this and stand this person about that. It's just a little bit too much. You know what I mean? So I would say that would be what it is not.
Right, meeting them where they are.
Yeah.
Not everyone's going to be perfect, but we want progress and trust-based. Okay, I see Janessa. I don't know if I'm saying your name correctly. I'm sorry. You have your hand up?
Yes, you did. I did. She basically said exactly what I was gonna say. It's like not badgering them and like making them feel horrible for missing appointments or not, or sometimes they don't have an excuse for why they're not missing it. It's just because they're not at that point where they're responsible and taking care of things. So It's just teaching them and guiding them and just being a support for them, still holding them accountable, but not badgering them.
Right. All right. Thank you so much. Okay, 2 others have their hands raised. Let's see. Tyra?
I was thinking one thing, is not requiring clients to do all the legwork. Like some case managers send the clients out to go look for apartments and a lot of them don't know where to look. So I think not being so assertive as to demanding that they find their own unit as opposed to helping them finding a unit.
Right. And we're gonna go into all of that, yes. All right. Excellent points. And of course, this is a separate training. So we will have a separate training all on assertive engagement, as it includes a lot of different components as well. So another best practice that we have within our homeless response system, and really coming from a place of understanding so that we can provide effective services, is knowing what harm reduction is. Right? So harm reduction is basically recognizing that people make their own choices based on their options and opinions of what feels right for them. Them is the emphasis, not what you think, not how you think that they need to operate, how you think they need to live their life, what you think they need to do, but what is right for them. That's the emphasis. So harm reduction acknowledges risky behaviors in a non-judgmental way. We're not going to turn an eye and say that someone's behavior is not risky, but we're not going to come from a judgmental place. Okay. Harm reduction also identifies practical ways of lessening consequences of such behavior. When we think about harm reduction, we often think of substance abuse. Right. However, harm reduction can be applied in various situations. It can be applied to substance abuse. It can be applied to mental health and other behavioral health concerns. It can be applied to just everyday life. Harm reduction is lessening the consequences of a behavior. So a seatbelt is a good example of just a harm reduction approach, right? It's something that hopefully we all put on, and we put that on because we want to avoid the consequences that may come along with not having a seatbelt on. We don't know if we're going to get in a car accident or not, but just in case we do, we want to make sure that we have our seatbelt on. So the principle of harm reduction can be applied to other areas outside of substance use. But some things to consider for harm reduction, as we said before, meeting someone where they are, but it is lessening the consequences. So, okay, if you know that maybe a client of yours is actively engaging in substances, harm reduction is not saying you need to stop. Instead, it is, okay, you're going to use. Can you use at a lesser frequency so that you're not at the point where you black out? If you're going to use, can you leave the door open just in case you need some assistance from someone? So those are just some examples of how you acknowledge the risky behavior, but you're working with them to lessen the consequences of the behavior, meeting them where they are. Does anyone have any questions or any examples of how they have applied harm reduction?
So is that like saying, I know you're gonna use, here's a Narcan spray just to be safe?
Yeah. Yeah. And when we think about harm reduction, that's what we often think about, Narcan. Yes, Narcan is a great example of harm reduction. All right.
Amber, I just wanted to say, I find it very difficult in this area to be non-judgmental. I'm being honest. I really do, because I just had someone in my office on the other day, and I was going, having a conversation with him. I did not agree with what he was going to do, but I also have to let him know that that's really risky behavior. So I'm all for assistance in this area. Really, I am, because I know people are going to do what they feel like what is right for them to do. And I don't know how to. Well, yeah, maybe I don't know how to not, you know what I mean? Like, let them know that I have some concerns, in other words.
So it's not acknowledging your concerns. It's not acknowledging the risky behaviors. You can do that. Try not to present it in a judgmental way, but you can acknowledge it. And it's working with those concerns and seeing, okay, can we meet in the middle somewhere? Here's my concerns. I know you're going to do whatever you want to do, but how can we meet in the middle so that the consequence is not as severe? And this is a separate training as well, Dawn. Kathy, you have your hand up?
Yes, hi everyone. Can you hear me?
Well, you said yep. I don't know. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, I understand what Dawn was saying. The reservations are definitely hard to keep. But we don't want to deter them from uh basically making progress, or going harder at whatever their choices. I have a client who is street homeless and chronically homeless, and he is struggling with alcoholism. And when it comes to searching for an apartment, I really want to say to him, stop drinking, please. Just cut it out for these X amount of days until we can land you somewhere. But I know I can't say that. It's not going to help. It's not realistic. So I just basically let him know, to consider the fact that when he drinks, he ends up in the hospital often. And if we have an appointment the next day, he doesn't want to end up, missing that appointment because he's in a hospital. So I told him, I'll let you know as soon as as soon as I know that we have a scheduled viewing for a unit, or to meet with a owner, to just try to limit how much that he drinks, or to just consider the fact that you have an appointment and you want to show up, the best that you can show up for the next day or for that day.
Right.
It worked for a little bit. But then again, struggling with substance abuse or dual diagnosis is pretty hard. So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I just learn not to take it personal. We try as much as we can.
Right. And that's all you can do. That's all you can do. Unfortunately, that he may do it. He's going to do it. That is where addiction comes in. Harm reduction is, I know that you're going to engage. You want to, okay, fine. Let's try to make the appointment viewing first thing in the morning. And then you can go ahead and do what you would like to do after. But can we compromise on that? All right. I'm going to speed up a bit. I'm sorry, because we have a good amount to go over. So something else that goes hand in hand with harm reduction and all of these other best practices that we're talking about is motivational interviewing. I can't emphasize enough how important motivational interviewing is. We often have motivational interviewing training. Actually, I need to probably schedule another one. Haven't had one in a few months, but motivational interviewing training is really important. And what it is it's a communication style. So it's a way to work with the client so that it's collaborative, it's goal-oriented, and you are really focusing on change behavior. right? You're focusing on allowing them and having them designing their personal motivation for commitment to a personal goal, and exploring with them where they truly stand with change. So some things that you all can do that comes along with motivational interviewing is asking open-ended questions. You're trying to gather as much information as possible, and you're going to assess and see where they are, so that you can get as much information and see where they truly are, as I just said. You want to affirm positive behavior. So strengths-based, right? Positive behaviors, positive things that they're doing, not just focusing on the negative. You want to listen reflectively. So really listening to see what is it that they're saying. Not often, it's not as easy for someone to say, I want my goals to be X, Y, and Z, or this is what's bothering me. But if you're listening, really listening, you can hear, like they're telling you something. So listen reflectively to have a better understanding of what it is that they're saying. You also want to summarize. So summarizing what it is that they shared with you, summarizing the maybe conversation that you all just had, the plan that you came up with, summarizing to make sure that you all are on the same page. There's motivational interviewing is such an important skill, as I said, and this is not, I don't do this training because it's so intensive. When we have these trainings, it's usually a workshop for several hours. So we will be having a MI training. I will put that on my list so that we can have that workshop. And we'll focus on the basics of motivational interviewing. And then we also will do an advanced motivational interviewing for those of you that understand the basic principles and you want to take it a step further. So when you're doing motivational interviewing, when MI is done well, clients will feel understood and accepted. They will be more willing to follow the plan. They'll have feelings of hopefulness, and then they'll be engaged. When MI is done poorly, clients will feel judged and disrespected. They'll be less likely to follow your plan, because it's not their plan, it's your plan if you created it for them. They may shift back towards hopelessness, and then they may get disengaged. All right, so the last best practice that we're going to go over is person-centered planning is essential in order to provide effective services. So person-centered planning is a collaborative process resulting in a plan. In our homeless response system, we often call that plan a housing stabilization plan. So with person-centered planning, the interventions are tailored to the person's goals and needs. It's directed by clients, by them, in partnership with you all, in partnership with the providers and their national supports. It's reflected in the co-created housing stabilization plan, which outlines the person's most valued goals and how all will work together to achieve them. So some key practices and really having a person-centered planning approach is the person is engaged in all planning activities and meetings, right? The person has reasonable control over the logistics. You're scheduling together where you're going to meet. It's not, this is how it's going to be. It's let's figure this out together. It is, the person's offered a written copy. It's their plan. They should have a copy of their plan, right? It is education, preparation regarding the process and what to expect. It's meeting ground rules may shift, understanding that there may be a shift. It's not all going to remain the same. And then the plan is also strength-based. So it highlights their strengths and it does not focus on what's wrong. So as I said, it's strengths-based, and strengths-based communication is really important. Language truly counts when we're putting together these plans. Language counts in general. So I have some examples for you all right? Now we're going to look at the best example of a strengths-based perspective. So out of these three, one is the best example. Is it number one, Joe only has a 9th grade education? This may be something that's written in the housing stabilization plan, right? Joe only has a 9th grade education. Number two, Sue didn't graduate from high school because she got addicted to drugs in her senior year. Number three, Kate was able to complete the 11th grade and start her senior year, even while living in a home where domestic violence was common. Which one is the best example of a strengths-based perspective?
Three.
Number three, yes. So you're acknowledging that Kate was in a home and she experienced domestic violence, but Kate completed the 11th grade and she started her senior year. Strengths-based, right? She did that despite being in a home with domestic violence. Strengths-based. So when you're creating these plans, we want to avoid using deficit language, such as certain terms that we may often use or see is someone is suffering from a certain diagnosis. Someone refuses to. Someone's non-compliant. They're a substance abuser. Those are deficit negative language. How can we switch suffering from? How can we change that into a strengths-based word? Okay, I'm going to answer because I need to hurry through the time. So instead of saying that someone is suffering from, we may instead say someone is living with, someone is recovering from, right? Instead of saying someone refuses to, we can say someone disagrees with, someone doesn't want to. Instead of saying someone's non-compliant, they're choosing alternatives. Someone's a substance abuser. Someone is a person living with an addiction too. So changing the word so that we're not focusing on the negative, but we're being more strengths-based. We're not saying what the concerns are, but we're not coming from a negative place. All right. So all of those are essential when it comes into providing effective services. And as I said, it's not just one thing, it includes all of these different things, okay? So providing services versus effective services. So effective service delivery and case management really focuses on solving the housing crisis. It focuses on supporting and helping a client on a path for housing stabilization, not just housing them, but housing stabilization. It focuses on helping a client resolve issues that impede access to housing. So what impedes their access? Is it, someone said credit, right? Someone said a criminal record. Maybe it's working with landlords on seeing if they can overlook doing a background check. So resolving the issues. If it's income, right? Helping them find employment. Connecting client to community resources and services. Support services goes hand in hand with housing. Effective service delivery promotes self-sufficiency. We don't want someone to only rely on else. We want them to be at a place where they're self-sufficient, right? They obtain housing and they know what to do to maintain that housing. It also emphasizes skill building. So teaching them the skills that they need so that they can be self-sufficient, so that they can be independent, so that they can maintain their housing. Those are main components when we're talking about the difference between case management and really effective case management. So effective service delivery focuses on housing retention, right? Housing plan goals focus on compliance with lease and how a client will pay the rent to maintain housing or housing stabilization. I know that case management is not required. We can't force someone to actively engage with us, but we need to make sure that they at least understand what they need to do so that they are able to stay housed, right? Make sure that they understand their lease, that they understand how to pay their rent so that they can stay housed. The minimum, stay housed. We want them to do what they have to do to maintain their housing. It's also client driven. If it's not their plan, they're not going to follow it. They are a part of that process. It has to be something that they agree with. Strengths-based, we touched on that. A effective service delivery, the housing plan goals should be SMART goals, right? They should be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time limited. You want to focus on short-term goals so that someone can feel as though they're accomplishing and making progress, as we discussed. The plan should be updated regularly based off of what is taking place in their life, what changes need to be done, what progress have they made. Maybe we need to take off a goal or objective and add a new one because they had some changes. And then intensity increases if necessary. So it may be initially you're meeting with someone monthly, and then you realize that they need more services. You can change that to weekly, bi-weekly, whatever the needs may be. But working with the person with creating their plan and really focusing on housing retention. I can't tell you all how many times that we see a housing stabilization plan is created before someone even meets with a client. Or how often the housing stabilization plan for one person looks the exact same as it does for another person. So the intervention should be tailored, it's client driven, it's client specific. We're going to go over the differences between providing services versus effective services. So an example is putting a client on a shelter wait list because they said they needed to go to a shelter. Okay, you put them on a shelter wait list, they asked for it, right? But effective service is engaging the client in a problem-solving conversation, practicing shelter diversion, assessing, asking them questions, digging deeper to really find out what's going on with them. Not just taking everything as face value, not simply putting them on a wait list because they say they want to or need to enter the shelter. Okay, so providing contact information to a resource, right? You're provided the contact information to a resource. However, effective service delivery is not providing the contact information, but you want to connect them to that resource, right? Ensuring that the resource is appropriate and viable. It's not a resource that's on a list and you don't know if they are not taking services at this point. It's not a resource that has been out of service 5 years ago. But it's also following up to get the outcome of the connection, right? To see, were they able to make an appointment? Were they able to get that resource? Do they have anything coming up? Case management, encouraging the client to get a job, right? They need to increase their income, they need a job, right? Encouraging them to get a job. However, effective service delivery is assisting them with creating a resume if they don't have one. It's teaching them where to look online to find jobs. It's connecting them to employment programs. It's practicing interviewing skills if they, to see how are they interviewing. Maybe they say that I've been on 5 interviews and I'm not able to get the job. Okay, well, how are you answering this question? Tabitha, you have your hand up?
One of the things that I've found is really helpful when, especially, because I do diversion, is that finding out what their passions are, because literally whatever they're going to be doing, they're going to be doing it for the rest of their life as far as job is concerned. And I think I think we forget to ask people that, some people just like working with, with people, so they might be more of a customer service person. So why would you send them someplace where they, it just gives you a better feel for the person. I've also sent people who have had jobs at the places like Dunkin' Donuts, and it's not their passion, and they are not successful there. And nobody's passion is Dunkin' Donuts. I'm just saying that.
You paused, but
sorry.
No, it's fine. You paused, but you can go ahead.
Again, finding out what their passion is might lead you to help them more successfully find an employment, because even if they have to start at the ground level, if they've already got a passion for it, they'll be more successful. It might not always be true for everybody, but I would say probably 60 to 70% of the time, I'm a little bit more successful if I use that analogy versus here, let's just get you a job because you need a job,
Right. Because if they get a job and, as you say, if they're not passionate, they're not going to keep that job. It's going to be really hard going to work every day. And unfortunately, they may quit, and then they're not able to maintain their housing. So yes, great point. Telling the client to do a budget, right? They need to maintain their housing. They need a budget so that they can continue with payment. Do a budget. However, effective service delivery is to check in to see, do they even know how to do a budget? Not everyone knows how to do a budget. Do they know how to do a budget? Do they know how to see the income that they have coming in? Do they need assistance with kind of tracking where their spending is going? Sometimes, I know, even myself, I may spend it, not even realize, how did I spend that much money that fast? So it is so different when you actually write it down and you see where your money is going. So help them do a budget. Provide them with the budget template. All right. I know I'm short on time, so I'm going to go through these. Hopefully some of you all can stay on with me. So we often tell a client that they can go ahead and find an apartment, right? Go ahead, you guys can go ahead and find an apartment. I'm going to check in with you each week to see if you found something yet. However, effective service delivery is really helping them with housing search, is really assisting them, is showing them where to look online if they're looking. It's providing them with the information of what they should be looking for. I had a client who said that he had a hard time finding an apartment. He could not find it. Why? Because he was looking for an apartment that had granite countertops. He was looking for an apartment that had a swimming pool attached. That's unrealistic expectations. You're not going to find that with the dollar amount that we have, with the budget that we have. So assist them and set those realistic expectations. Prepare them for interacting with the landlord, right? Advocate them. Engage your landlords that you may work with on a regular basis. Don't simply send them on their way to say, go ahead and find an apartment. If they're having a hard time finding one, having those questions to find out why are they having a hard time. Okay, so when we move someone into an apartment, great, make sure that they have a copy of their lease, right? Bringing them to sign their lease. They have the copy. However, effective service delivery is reviewing the lease with them, making sure that they understand what is in the lease, making sure that they know what they're responsible for when it comes to their rental payment, that they know when they need to pay, that they know the rules of the apartment complex, all of those different things, but making sure that they understand. Informing the client that they have to attend their appointments on time because they are always late or missing them. Effective service delivery may be inquiring about the methods that they're using to stay organized. Do they have an agenda? Do they keep their appointments in their phone? If not, teach them how to use the calendar feature in their phone. Provide them with appointment reminders if necessary, but going that extra mile, digging deeper. Once the client moves into the apartment, you check on them each month to see if they pay their rent. And then if they say yes, you can go ahead and discharge them, all right? However, effective service delivery is providing additional case management to ensure housing stability. Provide additional support services so that they can have them in place prior to discharge. Educating them on how to find additional resources if necessary. If they come into a tough situation, they know where to go to find that resource. And they don't only call you anytime that they're in a bind, but they know what they need to do. So the difference between providing services and effective services is really digging deeper, have those conversations, providing those teaching moments, seeing what skills they have. And of course, you all will assess, not everyone needs intensive, right? Not everyone may need a good amount of hand holding, as some may say, but people need different interventions. They may need a higher level of assistance versus some others. So assessing what someone truly needs. If someone is struggling to maintain their rental payment, why? Right? Let's take this budget out. Let's see where this money is going. So going that extra mile. We're on time. We do have some scenarios that we're going to go over. I am going to hand it over to one of my staff, Catherine. Yes, Catherine is on. Catherine, can you go over the first scenario? And actually, before you do that, those of you that actually have to go at 2:30, just so that you can know, this is being recorded. So the recording as well as the slides will be available. They'll be on our website. If you go to our website, cch.org, you can go to our webinar library. And we'll have it in there within the next 2 days. You'll have the recording as well as the slides if you have to get off early. Handing it over to you, Catherine.
Thanks, Amber. So can everyone hear me? Hopefully. Okay. So based on the strategies that we just went over, examples of, too light a touch and the right amount of support for a client, I'm just going to read off the scenario and you can let me know what you think. Mr. Richards, 78 years old, has been in shelter for a week after having been evicted last month from his apartment of 5 years. He has a daughter who lives in Maryland, but she doesn't have the space to have him stay or any funds to send him. His wife passed away a year ago and he lost most of his possessions, including his vehicle, in the eviction. He states that he's a veteran, but he doesn't know if he's eligible for benefits. He gets frustrated when his case manager raises the question of getting him connected to services because he says he's too old to understand how to use a computer for the enrollment process. He doesn't have a phone and he doesn't have the energy to stand in line all day. He says that his wife, who worked at the local public library, used to take care of all his appointments, accounts, and documents for him. He says he receives a monthly Social Security retirement benefit that hasn't, had access to his check since he was evicted because he doesn't know what to put down for his address. So just some questions to get started. What information would you ask for from Mr. Richards to fill in the details that you need? And I think I purposely left some details out, so feel free to jump in. Tabitha.
I would, for me, depending on what area he was in, I would reach out to, I would talk to him and let him know that there is a rapid rehousing program or rental assistance program through the Veterans Association, and ask him if it would be okay if I contacted that person and if they could contact him. The other thing that I would probably do, that was the biggest thing that stood out to me, because, but I also know that there are several shelters that have have beds for, and he's already in shelter. So that was the biggest thing that stood out. There was a lot of other things as you were reading. And right now I'm drawing a blank, but yeah, that's a big place that I would start. And then I would also probably, that would be one thing. The other thing I would do is I would request to have his mail sent to the shelter temporarily. We often do that at Bethel while they're in shelter, to help assist with getting his check started again, because he's going to need that. I think, just being patient and listening to him will help guide us. It definitely struck out that he's very unsure of what the next steps are, and he really needs his case manager to guide him and let him know that they are there, and follow up for him, because right now he's so overwhelmed and so traumatized that I don't think he could do it without some serious assistance from the case manager's perspective.
That's great. I mean, pinpointing those two areas that will make up, the biggest difference for him, and then also acknowledging that, he's an adult, and he's got his, he's got his learning curve, but that you're going to help guide him through the learning process, and that he's not alone. Anybody else?
I would ask him if he wanted to schedule like meetings at least weekly, because I know he gets frustrated pretty easily, and the expectation of him trying to contact people is not feasible, especially when they like ask him to go on the computer. So I tell my clients a lot of times, I'm just like, listen, if the best case scenario is we work on stuff on the computer and we have my phone on speaker while we're on hold, like at least you have company, because that causes anxiety. So like, why not? We can crack some jokes. We can knuckle around on the computer and look at other options while we're going through this. And during that time, I could show him a couple of websites that are very easy to navigate, so that if he wanted to do it independently, he could do so. And then maybe also like teach him how, like in his email, there's also a calendar, so he can like set his like scheduling and budget there. Just like continue, like if it starts out at a week process and then maybe slows down to like once a month, what have you, at least he knows that there's somebody who's going to see him, that's going to be there to support him, even if it's just for like 1 hour a week. That means a ton to him, and not as much to me to take an hour a week to go to a library or something.
Right. So definitely not sending people off to try and figure it out themselves, but in a non-patronizing way, helping them through. That's great. Anybody have any other thoughts? Both great. I just wanted to prompt folks to think about what you might need to, where you might need to learn about, because I never worked with veterans, but if I needed to learn how to work with veterans, that would be an example of maybe a place where we could add to our own library of knowledge. But if there are any other ways that you can seek support to help a client with a specific issue, that's always helpful. Okay, I think that's.
I also think if you're struggling, there are a lot of counterparts at other agencies. I mean, I work for Bethel, but I have multiple community partners, and often I will reach out and say I have and at this time I'm covering about 7 towns. So I may say, hey, Milford, I might reach out to their housing specialist at Bethel and say, hey, any direction you can point me. They will often do that for me too. If they have somebody that's coming in and maybe sheltered in Milford, but is from the shoreline and can actually testify to that,
That's great. Yes, definitely leveraging your networks and staying connected to those networks.
All right. Thank you, Catherine. Because of time, we did not go over it as intensely that we usually would. And we do have 2 other scenarios, but we're not going to go over them. I do encourage you all, once you get these slides, for you to ask yourself these questions and go over it, applying the different things that we discussed in today's training. So I guess you all have some homework to do, if you will. But we are going to open it up to any questions that you all may have. As I said, the slides and the recording will be available. If you all do have any additional questions, I have left my email address there for you. And then if you have any additional training needs or so, you can also email training@cch.org, or you can just email me because it's going to come to me anyways. But I'm going to open it up for any questions that anyone has at this point. Or comments or feedback.
Well, I think you did a great job, Amber, explaining that to us. So thank you.
Thank you, Tahira. All right. If no one has anything else, thank you all for joining us. Please look out for additional trainings on these various topics as well as other topics. You all can always look at our training calendar on our website. We also send out training emails that will list what the different trainings are. We do have a training that is next week that I have not publicly advertised yet. I just confirmed it, but we will be having a training on monkeypox. I will be sending that out. That is with DPH. So look out for that as well as all the other trainings that we have coming. So thank you all, and you all have a great day. If I can leave, let's see.